Alright, hello, welcome to part 2, because my streaming software decided to crash randomly, and now we're back. I'm just gonna start back at the beginning of the Birth of Volsung. Now there is this to tell. The queen soon discovered that she was carrying a child, and the pregnancy continued for a long time without her being able to give birth. Then there came a time when Rerer, as is custom of kings, had to go on a campaign to pacify his land. On this journey, it happened that Rerer took sick and soon died. He intended to go to Odin. In those days, that seemed desirable to many. The queen's distress continued as before. She could not give birth to the child, and this affliction continued for 6 years. Then she recognized she would not live long and asked that the child be cut from her. It was done as she requested. The child was a boy, and he had already was grown before he was born, as was to be expected. It was said that the boy kissed his mother in what were thought to be tests of manhood and prowess. He became a greatest of warriors, and was victorious in the battles he fought on his expeditions. When Volsung was fully grown, Fafnir sent him his daughter Hjold, who was mentioned earlier, when she took the apple to Rerer, Volsung's father. Volsung married Hjold. They were together for a long time, well agreed and intimate. They had 10 sons and 1 daughter. Their eldest son was called Sigmund, and the daughter was named Signe. They were twins, and in all things they were the foremost and the finest looking of the children of the king Volson, though all other sons were imposing. It was long been remembered and highly spoken of that the descendants of Volson were exceptionally ambitious. They surpassed most men named in old sagas in both knowledge and accomplishments, and the desire to win. It is said that King Volson had an excellent palace built in this fashion. A huge tree stood with its trunk in the hall and its branches with fair blossoms stretched out through the roof. They called the tree Barnstock. Chapter 3. Sigmund draws the sword from Barnstock. There was a king called Sigurd who ruled over Gotland. He was a powerful king and had many followers. He paid a visit to King Volsung and asked for Signe's hand in marriage. The king took the proposal well, as did his sons, but Signe, her part, was unwilling. Even so, she asked her father to make the decision, as he did in other matters that concerned her. It seemed advisable to the king to betroth her, and she was promised to King Sigurd. When the banquet and the marriage were to take place, King Sigurd was to feast at King Volsung's. Using the best provisions, the king made ready for the feast. When the banquet was fully prepared, the guests of King Volsung and King Sigurd came on the appointed day, and King Sigurd had many worthy men with him. It is said that large fires were kindled in the long hearths running the length of the hall, but in the middle of the great hall stood the great tree that earlier was mentioned. It is now that when the people were sitting by the fires in the evening, a man came into the hall. He was not known to the men by sight. He was dressed in this way. He wore a mottled cape that was hooded. He was barefoot and had linen breeches tied around his legs. As he walked up to Barnstock, he held a sword in his hand. Over his head was a low-hanging hood. He was very tall and gray with age, and he had only one eye. He brandished the sword and thrust it into the trunk so it sank up to the hilt. Words of welcome failed everyone. Then the man began to speak. "He who draws this sword out of this trunk shall receive it from me as a gift, and he himself shall prove that he was never carried a better sword than this one." Then this old man walked out of the hall, and no one knew who he was or where he was going. They stood up now, and no one disputed whether or not to grasp the sword. Each thought that the one who reached it first would be best off. The noblest men went up to it first, and then each of the others. No one who came forward succeeded in moving it, no matter how hard he tried. Now Sigmund, the king of King Volson, the son of King Volsung, came forward. He grasped the sword and drew it from the trunk. It was as if the sword lay loose for him. The weapon seemed so good that no one recalled ever seeing so fine a sword. Sigurd offered to weigh Sigmund out triple the sword's weight in gold, to which Sigmund answered, "You could have taken the sword from where it stood, no less than I did, if you were meant to carry it." But now that it has come first into my hands, you will never obtain it, even if you should offer me all the gold you own." King Sigurd became very angry at these words and thought the answer scornful. But since he was a very underhanded and deceitful man, he pretended not to care about this matter. That evening, however, he thought of means of paying Sigmund back. And this is later what came about. Chapter 4. Sigurd plots revenge. Someone has just commented that I should read the story of Kukulane, which would be a lot of fun. I don't have that. Actually, I might have that book. No, I don't have that book. Hannah has that book. Chapter 4. Sigurd plots revenge. Now there is this to be said. Sigurd went to bed with Signe that evening. The next day the weather was good. King Sigurd said that he wanted to return home rather than wait until the wind rose or the sea became impassable. It is not told that King Volsung or his sons held Sigurd back, especially when King Volsung saw that Sigurd wanted nothing other than to leave the feast. Then Signe spoke to her father. "I do not wish to go away with Sigurd, nor do my thoughts laugh with him. I know through my foresight and that special ability found in our family that if the marriage contract is not quickly dissolved, this union will bring us much misery." "You should not say such things, daughter," he replied, "for it would be shameful for both him and for us to break our agreement without cause. And if it is broken, we could neither have his trust nor bind him in a friendly alliance. He would repay us with much ill will as he could. The one honorable thing to do is to hold to our side of the bargain." King Sigurd prepared for the homeward voyage. Before he and his followers departed from the feast, he invited King Volsung, his kinsman by marriage, to pay him a visit in Gotland in 3 months' time. King Volsung was invited with all his sons, and all the men he wanted and thought befitting his dignity. By doing this, King Sigurd wished to make up for his shortcomings in not staying more than one night during the wedding celebration, for it was not custom of men to behave that way. King Volsung promised to make the journey and to come on the appointed day. The in-laws and King Sigurd traveled home with his wife. Chapter 5. The Fall of Volsung. Now, it is said, it is the time to tell that King Volsung and his sons journeyed to Gotland at the appointed time, and according to the invitation of their in-law, King Sigurd. They set off in 3 ships, all well manned, and the voyage went well. When they arrived off Gotland in their ships, it was already late evening. That same evening, Signe, the daughter of King Volsung, came and called her father and brothers together for a private talk. She told them of King Sigurd's plans, that Sigurd had gathered an unbeatable army, and he plans to betray you. "Now I ask you," she said, "to return at once to your own kingdom and gather the largest force you can, then come back here and avenge yourselves. But do not put yourselves in this trap, for you will not escape his treachery if you do not do as I advise." King Volsung then spoke. "All people will bear witness that unborn I spoke one word, and vowed that I would flee neither from fire nor iron from fear. And I have done so until now. Why should I not fulfill that vow in my old age? Maidens will not taunt my sons during games by saying they feared their deaths, for each man must at one time die. No one may escape dying that once, and it is my counsel that we do not flee, but for our own part act the bravest. I have fought 100 times, sometimes with a larger army and sometimes with a lesser one. Both ways I have had the victory, and it will not be reported that I either fled nor asked for peace." Then Signe cried bitterly and asked that she might not be made to return to King Sigurd. King Volson answered, "You must certainly go home to your husband and be together with him, however it goes with us." Then Signe went home, and Volsung and his men remained there through the night. In the morning, as soon as dawn came, King Volsung ordered all his men to get up and go ashore, and prepare for battle. They now all went on land, fully armed, and they did not have long to wait before King Sigurd arrived with his army. The hardest of battles took place between them. The king urged his men forward as fiercely as possible. It is said that King Volsung and his songs went through King Sigurd's flanks 8 times that day, hewing on both sides. And when they intended to do so yet again, King Volsung fell in the middle of his ranks with all his men except his 10 sons. Because the force against them was overwhelming, they were forced to give way. His sons were seized and bound and taken away. Signe learned that her father had been killed and her brothers taken prisoner and destined for death. She now asked King Sigurd to speak with her in private. Signe spoke, "I want to ask you not to have my brothers killed so quickly, but rather that you have them put in stocks. For as with me in the saying, the eye takes pleasure while it yet beholds. I do not ask for anything further for them, for I do not think they would be of any use." Then Signe answered her, "You are mad and out of your senses to plead such a worse misfortune for your brothers than that they be hewed down. But I will grant your request, because I think it's better that they suffer more and are tortured longer before they die." Sigurd had Signe's wish carried out. A great trunk was brought and fitted with stocks on the feet of 10 of the brothers, somewhere in the woods. They sat there all day until night, but at midnight an old she-wolf came to them from the woods as they sat in the stocks. She was both large and grim-looking. She bit one of the brothers to death and ate him all up. After that she went away. In the morning, Signe set out her most trustworthy men to her brothers to learn what had occurred, and when he returned, he told her one of them had died. She thought it would be grievous if they all shared the same fate, but she could not help them. What happened can be quickly told. For 9 nights in a row, the same she-wolf came at midnight, and each time killed and ate one of the brothers, until all but Sigmund were dead. And now, before the 10th night, Signe sent her trusted man to her brother Sigmund. She gave him some honey, and instructed him to smear it on Sigmund's face and put some of it in his mouth. Her man went to Sigmund, did as he had been instructed, and then returned home. As usual, the same she-wolf came in the night, meaning to bite Sigmund to death, as she had his brothers. But then she caught the scent of honey that had been rubbed on him. She licked his face all over with her tongue, and reached her tongue into his mouth. He did not lose his composure, and bit the wolf's tongue. She jerked and pulled back hard, thrusting her feet against the trunk so that it split apart. But Sigmund held on so tightly the wolf's tongue was torn out by the roots, and that was her death. And some men say that the she-wolf is Sigurd's mother, who had assumed this shape through witchcraft and sorcery. Chapter 6. Signe plots revenge. Now Sigmund is free, and the stocks were broken. He stayed there in the forest. Once again Signe sent men to find out what had taken place, and if Sigmund was alive. And when they came, Sigmund told him all that had occurred between him and the she-wolf. Then they went home and told Signe of the events. She went and met with her brother, and they decided that he should make an underground dwelling in the woods. Things went on for a while with Signe hiding him there and bringing him what he needed. King Sigurd, however, believed that all the Volsungs were dead. King Sigurd had 2 sons by his wife. It is said that Signe sent the elder, when he was 10 years old, to meet with Sigmund, so that the boy could help if Sigmund wanted to try to avenge his father. The boy went to the woods late in the evening, arrived at Sigmund's underground dwelling. He was received well enough and was told to make bread for them, and I will look for firewood. Sigmund handed him a sack of flour, and went himself to look for wood. But when he returned, the boy had done nothing but making bread. Now Sigmund asked if the bread was ready, and the boy answered, "I dare not touch the flour sack because something alive was in the meal." Sigmund now realized this boy was not so stout-hearted, and he would want the lad with him. When brother and sister next met, Sigmund said that he thought himself no closer to having a companion, even though the boy was there with him. Signe answered, "Then take the boy and kill him. He need not live any longer." And so he did. Great parenting, guys. The winter passed, and the next winter Signe sent her younger son to meet with Sigmund. This story, however, does not need to be recounted at length, for such things happen in much the same way, with Sigmund killing the boy at Signe's request. Chapter 7. Signe gives birth to Sinfjotli. Oh, this story. It is now told... Buckle up, folks. It is now told while Signe was sitting in her chamber, a sorceress, exceedingly skilled in the magic arts, came to her. Signe said to her, "I want the 2 of us to exchange shapes." The sorceress answered, "It shall be as you wish," and she used her craft so that they switched places. The sorceress now took Signe's place as Signe wished. She slept with the king that night, and he did not notice it was not Signe beside him. Ugh. Now it was to be told of Signe that she went to her brother's underground dwelling and asked for him to give her refuge for the night. For I have lost my way out in the forest, and I do not know where I am going. He said she could stay, and he would not refuse shelter to a woman alone, believing she would not repay his hospitality by betraying him. She entered his shelter, and they sat down to eat. Wow, I can't read right now. Sat down to eat. He frequently glanced at her and found her a fine and handsome woman. Remember, this is the sorceress. Technically, kind of, not really. And when they had eaten their fill, he told her that he wanted them to share one bed that night. She did not object, and had her next to him for 3 nights in a row. After that, she returned home, met with the sorceress, and asked that they exchange shapes again, which the sorceress did. Here's where things get even weirder. After a time, Signe gave birth to a son. This son was called Sinfiotli, and he grew up to be large and strong, handsome of appearance, and very like the Volsungs stock. He was not quite 10 years old when Signe sent him to Sigmund in his underground shelter. Before sending her sons first to Sigmund, she had tested them by stitching the cuffs of their kirtles to their hands, passing the needle through both flesh and skin. They withstood this ordeal poorly and cried out in pain. She also did this to Sinfiotli. He did not flinch. Then she ripped out the kirtle from him, so that the skin followed the sleeves. She said it must certainly be painful for him. He replied, "Such pains would seem trifling to a Volsung." Then the boy came to Sigmund. Sigmund asked him to knead the flour, and he went to look for firewood. He handed the boy a sack and went off into the woods. When he returned, Sinfiotli had finished the baking. Then Sigmund asked if he had discovered anything in the flour. "I am not without suspicion," he said, "that there was something alive in the flour when I first began kneading, but I have kneaded it in, whatever it was." Then Sigmund laughed as he spoke. "I do not think you should make your meal from this bread tonight, for you have kneaded into it the most poisonous of snakes." Sigmund was so hardy he could eat poison with no ill effect. However, Sinfiotli, although he could tolerate poison externally, he could neither eat nor drink it. Yeah, that's the poison works, kids. Chapter 8. Sigmund and Sinfiotli don the skins. It is now to be told that Sigmund first thought Sinfiotli too young to seek vengeance with him, and that he wanted to accustom the boy to hardship. During the summers, they traveled widely through the forest, killing men for booty. It seemed to Sigmund that Sinfiotli took much after the Volsung race. Nevertheless, he believed the boy to be the son of King Sigurd, and to have the evil disposition of his father, along with the fierce zeal of the Volsungs. Sigmund felt that Sinfiotli did not put much store in kinship, for the boy often reminded Sigmund of his grievances, strongly urging the man to kill King Sigurd. One time, they went again to the forest to get themselves some riches, and they found a house. Inside it were 2 sleeping men with thick gold rings. A spell had been cast upon them. Wolf skins hung over them in the house, and on only every 10th day could they shed the skins. They were the sons of kings. Sigmund and Sinfiotli put on the skins and could not get them off. And the weird power was there as before. They howled like wolves, both understanding the sounds. Now they set out into the forest, each going his own way. They agreed then that they would risk a fight with as many as 7 men, but not with more, and that one being attacked by more than howl with his wolf's voice. "Do not break this agreement," said Sigmund, "because you are young and daring, and men will want to hunt you." Now each went his own way, and when they had parted, Sigmund found 7 men and howled in his wolf's voice. Sinfiotli heard him, and came at once, and killed them all. They parted again. Before Sinfiotli had traveled very far in the forest, he met 11 men, and fought them. In the end, he killed them all. Badly wounded, Sinfiotli went under an oak tree to rest. Then Sigmund came and said, "Why didn't you call?" Sinfiotli said, "I did not want to call you for help. You accepted to help to kill 7 men. I am a child in age next to you, but I did not ask to help in killing 11 men. Sigmund leapt at him so fiercely that Sinfiotli staggered and fell. Sigmund bit him in the windpipe. That day they were not able to come out from under the wolfskins. Sigmund laid Sinfiotli over his shoulder, carried him back home to the hut, and sat over him. He cursed the wolfskins, bidding the trolls to take them. One day, Sigmund saw 2 weasels. One bit the other in the windpipe, and then ran into the woods, returning with a leaf and laying it on the wound. The other weasel sprang up healed. Sigmund went out and saw a raven flying with a leaf. The raven brought the leaf to Sigmund, who drew it over Sinfjotli's wounds. At once Sinfjotli sprang up healed, as if he was never injured. Then they went to the underground dwelling and stayed there, until they were able to take off the wolf skins. They took the skins and burned them in a fire, hoping that these objects would cause no further harm. Under that magic spell, they performed many feats in King Sigurd's kingdom. When Sinfjotli was fully grown, Sigmund thought he had tested him fully. It was not long before Sigmund wanted to seek revenge for his father Volsung. I mean, it's been like 30 years, but, not too long, if it could be brought about. One day, they left the underground dwelling and came late in the evening to King Sigurd's estate. They entered the outer room, which was in front of the main hall. Inside the room were ale casks, and they hid themselves. The queen found out where they were and wanted to meet with them. And when they met, they decided when it would grow dark, they would take revenge for their father. Signe and the king had 2 young children. They played together in the hall with golden toys, rolling the toys along the floor and running after them. One gold ring was flung farther out, into the room where Sigmund and Sinfjotli were, and the boy ran after the ring to look for it. Then he saw 2 large, fierce men sitting there wearing long helmets and shining mail. He ran into the hall to his father and told him what he had seen. The king suspected treachery. Signe heard what they said. She rose up, took both children, went to the outer room to Sigmund and Sinfjotli, where they would know that the children had betrayed them. And I would advise you to kill them. Sigmund said, I will not kill your children, even if they have betrayed me. But Sinfjotli did not falter. He drew his sword and killed both children, cast them into the hall in front of the King Sigurd. The king now stood up and called on his followers to seize the men who had been riding into the entrance hall all evening. Men ran out, wanting to seize them, but Signe and Sinfjotli defended themselves well and valiantly. For a long while, the one who was the nearest them was thought to have been the worst. But, at last, Sigmund and Sinfjotli were overpowered and captured. They were bound and fettered, and they sat there all night. Now the king considered what was the slowest death he could prepare for them. When morning came, he had a large cairn built of stones and turf. When the mound was finished, he had a huge stone slab set in the middle of the cairn, so that one edge pointed upwards and the other downward. The stone was so large that it reached both sides of the cairn, and no one could go around it. Now he had Sigmund and Sinfjotli taken and put in the mound, one on each side of the stone, because he thought it was worse for them not to be together, yet able to hear each other. And when they were covering the mound with turf, Signe came up, holding some straw in her arms, and she threw it into the mound to Sinfjotli, and told the thralls to conceal her act from the king. They agreed, and then the mound was closed. And when night came, Sinfjotli said to Sigmund, I don't think our food will run short for a while, for the queen has thrown some pork wrapped in straw into the mound. And he felt the pork again, and found that Sigmund's sword was stuck in it. He knew it by the hilt, for it was dark in the cairn. He told Sigmund, and they were both overjoyed. Now Sinfjotli thrust the sword into the point of the rock and pulled hard. The sword bit into the slab. Sigmund grasped at the point, and they sawed the rock between them. They did not stop until the sawing was finished, as is told. They cut with might the massive slab, Sigmund with his sword, and Sinfjotli. Probably rhymed better in the original language. Now they were both loose together in the cairn, and they had sawed through both rock and iron, thus coming out of the mound. They went back to the hall. All the men were asleep. They carried wood from the hall and set the wood afire. Those inside woke up because of the smoke, and the hall blazing around them. The king asked who had set the fire. Here I am with Sinfjotli, my sister's son, said Sigmund, and now we want you to know that not all the Volsungs are dead. Sigmund asked his sister to come out and receive him from his esteem and great honor, for he wished in this way to amend her sorrows. She replied, Now you will know whether I am remembered the slaying of King Volsung by King Sigurd. I had our children killed when I thought them too slow in avenging our father, and I came to you in the forest in the shape of a sorceress, and somehow he's not horrified by all of this. Because of this, he has so much zeal. He is the child of both a son and a daughter of King Volson. In everything I've worked towards the killing of King Sigurd. I have worked so hard to bring about vengeance that I am by no means fit to live. Willingly I shall now die with King Sigurd, although I married him reluctantly. Then she kissed her brother Sigmund and Sinfjotli, walked into the fire, and wished them farewell. She died there with King Sigurd and the retainers. The kinsmen, Sigmund and Sinfjotli, gathered men and ships, and Sigmund set out from his patrimony. There he expelled from the country the king who had set himself up as ruler after King Volson. Sigmund now became a rich and excellent king, wise and ambitious. He married a woman called Borgchild. Borghild. They had 2 sons, one named Helgi and the other Hamund. And when Helgi was born, Norns came out and set his destiny, saying that he would be the most famous of all kings. Sigmund had returned from battle with a leek to meet his son. He gave the boy the name Helgi, and as gifts of his name fastening, he granted Hringstred, Solfell, and a sword. He bid the child to advance himself well, and to take after the race of the Volsungs. Helgi grew to be magnanimous and well-loved, and surpassed most other men in all accomplishments. It is said that he went warring when he was 15 years old. Helgi was a king over the troops, and Sinfjotli was asked to accompany him. Both commanded the men. I'm going to take a quick break from reading, as I am sore from saying Sigmund, Signe, and Sinfjotli. Sinfjotli. That's a name right there. So, interesting thing about this this book, the Saga of the Volsungs, is that parts of The Hobbit are very directly pulled from this book. A bit of the ways further into it. You can see concerning the Volsungs, Birth of Sigurd. About chapter 14 is where we start getting the basis of the One Ring. 15 is about a fancy sword to kill a dragon. 16, telling the future of Sigurd. 17, Sigurd kills folks. 18, Reagan and Sigurd go riding. 19, there's the dragon part. About 18 and 19 is where there's actually dragons. Much like The Hobbit. Yeah. It's actually some of my favorite Scandinavian stories comes from over there. But right now, we've got about 8 chapters to go. Chapter 9. Helgi marries Sigrid. It is said that, while raiding, Helgi came across a king called Hunding. He was a powerful king with a large following and ruled over a country. It became to a battle between them. Helgi pushed resolutely forward, and the battle ended with Helgi as the victor. King Hunding fell with a great many of his men. Helgi now saw his status increase considerably, having killed so powerful a king. In order to avenge their father, Hunding's sons now raised an army against Helgi. They engaged in a fierce battle, and after Helgi fought his way through his brothers' ranks, attacking their standards. Of Hunding's sons, he killed Ulf and Eljolf, Hervard and Hagabard, and here he won a renowned victory. And when Helgi left the battle, he found many women of worthy appearance by the edge of the forest. They were riding in magnificent attire, yet one of them, she who was in the lead, surpassed all the others, and Helgi asked for her name. She called herself Sigrid, and said she was the daughter of King Hogni. Helgi said, "Accompany us home and be welcome." Then the king's daughter replied, "We have a different task before us from drinking with you." Helgi asked, "What might that be, princess?" She answered, "King Hogni has promised me to Hodbrod, the son of Grandmar. But I have sworn that I would no sooner have him than a young crow. Yet the marriage will take place unless you stop Hodbrod. Fight him with your army and take me away, because there is no king with whom I'd rather dwell than with you." "Be of good cheer, Princess," Helgi said. "We would sooner try our valor than have you marry him. I shall first see which of us overcomes the other. I stake my life on this." Then Helgi sent men with gifts of value to call up followers, and he summoned all his troops to Byock. Helgi waited there until a mighty company came to him from Hedisney. Then a large troop came to him from Narvastrand in big and handsome ships. King Helgi called his ship's captain, named Leif, to him and asked if he had counted their army. But the man replied, "It is not easy to count, my lord. The ships that have come from Narvastrand have 12,000 men, but the other troop is half again larger." Then King Helgi said he would turn into the fjord called Varnsfjord, and this they did. A violent storm broke upon them, with seas so high and waves crashing upon the hulls sounded like cliffs colliding. Helgi told the men not to fear, and not to reef the sails, but rather to set sail higher than before. They were on the point of foundering before they could reach land. Then Sidrun, the daughter of King Hogni, came down to the coast with a large following and directed Helgi and his men to a good harbor called Nippeland. The men of the country saw these events, and King Hodbrod's brother, the one who ruled Svarnshag, also came down the coast. He called to them and asked them who was leading such a large force. Sinfjotli stood up, his helmet shining like glass on his head, his coat of mail white as snow, his spear in his hand adorned with a magnificent banner, and his shield rimmed with gold before him. This man knew how to speak with kings. "When you have fed your pigs and hounds and you meet your wife, say that the Volsungs have come, and King Helgi can be found here in the army, if Hodbrod wants to meet him. And it is Helgi's pleasure to fight with distinction while you kiss your bondwoman by the fire." Grandmar answered, "You are not able to say much of worth or speak of ancient lore, since you lie about noble men. More likely it is that you long nourished yourself on the food of wolves out in the forest and killed your brothers. And it is strange that you dare come in an army with good men, you who have sucked the blood of many corpses." Sinfjotli replied, "You probably don't remember clearly now that when you were the witch on Varensey, and said you wanted to marry a man and then chose me for the role of husband. And afterwards, you were a Valkyrie in Asgard, and all were on the verge of fighting for your sake. I sired 9 wolves on you at Laganus, and I was the father of them all." Grandmar responded. Basically, at this point, they're just trying to tell the tallest tale. Grandmar replied, "You're a great liar. I do not think you could sire anyone, because you were gelded by giants' daughters on Thranzes. You are the stepson of King Sigurd, and you lay in the woods with wolves. All misfortunes come to you on one on top of the other. You killed your brothers and made for yourself an evil reputation." Sinfjotli replied, "Do you remember when you were a mare with a stallion granny, and I rode you at full speed on Bravel? Afterward, you were the goat herd on the giant Galner." Grandmar said, "I would rather feed the birds on your corpse than quarrel with you any longer." About time. Then King Helgi said, "It would be better and more clever of you both to fight than to speak in a manner that's shameful to hear. Grandmar's sons are no friends of mine, but they're still hardy men." Grandmar now rode away to meet with King Hodbrod at the place called Solfell. Their horses were named Svedbid and Svegjud. They met at a fortress gate, and King Hodbrod was told the war news. Hodbrod was in his mail coat and his helmet on his head. When he asked who they were, "And why are you so angry?" Grandmar replied, "The Volsungs have come here with 12,000 men near shore and 7,000 on an island called Sok, but they have the largest force in a place called Grindir, and I think that Helgi will now want us to fight." The king responded, "Let us send a call through our kingdom and proceed against them. No one shall sit at home who wants to fight. Let us send word to the sons of Hring and to old Hogni and to Alf the Old. They are all great warriors." They met at a place called Frankenstein. Not Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein. And held savage battle ensued. Helgi pushed forward through his opponent's ranks. A great many men fell there. Then they saw a large band of shield maidens. It was like looking into a fire. Sigmund, the king's daughter, had arrived. King Helgi advanced against King Hodbrod and killed him with his own standard. Then Sigmund said, "Receive my thanks for this brave deed. Lands will now find new owners. This is a most fortunate day for me, and you will receive glory and fame for killing so powerful a king." King Helgi assumed power in that kingdom and lived there a long time. He married Sigrid and became a famous and excellent king, and he is out of the saga. Good for him. He got to retire. Alright, 3 more chapters before my favorite story in this book. Chapter 10. Concerning the Volsungs. The Volsungs now journeyed home, having once again greatly increased their reputation. Sinfjotli set off raiding again. He saw a lovely woman and strongly desired to have her. The brother of Borghild, the wife of King Sigmund, had also asked for her hand. They contested the issue in a battle, and Sinfjotli slew this king. He now went raiding far and wide, fought many battles, and was always the victor. He became the most renowned and celebrated of men, and returned home in the fall with many ships and much wealth. He told his father what had happened, and the king told the queen. She asked Sinfjotli to leave the kingdom, saying she did not want to see him. Sigmund said he would not let him go away, and offered to compensate her loss with gold and great wealth, even though he had never before paid compensation for a man. He said there was no distinction to be had in contending with women. When she could not have her way, she said, "You shall decide, sir, as is fitting." With the king's consent, Borghild now arranged her brother's funeral feast, preparing the banquet for her best of provisions. She invited many important men, and served herself the drink. And she herself served the drink. She came before Sinfjotli with a large drinking horn, saying, "Drink now, stepson." He accepted the horn, looked inside, and said, "This drink is fouled." Sigmund said, "Give it to me then," and drank it down. The queen said, "Why should other men drink ale for you?" She came again with the drinking horn. "Drink now." And she taunted him with many words. He took the horn and said, "This drink is mixed with treachery." Sigmund said, "Then give it to me." She came a third time and bid him to drain it, if he had the heart of a Volsung. Sinfjotli took the horn and answered, "There is poison in this drink." Sigmund answered, "Filter it through your mustache, son." Corbin said, "This is proof why women live longer." It is, because they don't filter poison through their mustaches. The king is quite drunk, and therefore he talked in this way. Sinfjotli drank it and at once fell to the ground. Sigmund rose, and his sorrow was almost his death. He took the body in his arms and went to the woods, coming at last to a fjord. There he saw a man in a small boat. The man asked if he wanted to accept from him a passage across the fjord. Sigmund said yes. The boat was so small it could not bear them all, so the body was first carried, as Sigmund walked along the fjord. The next moment the boat and the man disappeared before Sigmund's eyes. After that Sigmund returned home, and now drove the queen out. A short time later she died. King Sigmund continued to rule over his kingdom, and is thought to be the greatest champion and king in ancient times. Chapter 11. Sigmund marries Jordiz. There was a king named Elmi. He was powerful and famous. His daughter was named Jordiz, the fairest and wisest of all women. King Sigmund heard that she was none other. King Sigmund heard that she and none other was the match for him. Sigmund set out to King Elmi. King Elmi prepared a great feast for Sigmund, to be held on the condition that Sigmund had not come with the intention of fighting. Messages were exchanged between the two, confirming that the purpose of this time was friendship and not war. The banquet was prepared with the best provisions, and many people were present. Everywhere he went, King Sigmund was provided with a marketplace, and given other amenities for his journey. They arrived now at the feast, and the two kings shared one hall. King Lingvi, the son of King Hunding, also came. He, too, wanted to become King Elemi's son-in-law. Man, so many love triangles. It was apparent to King Elemi that both men could not succeed at the same errand, and he also thought that likely trouble might be expected from one who failed. Then the king said to his daughter, "You are a wise woman, and I have said that you shall choose your own husband. Choose now between these two kings, and I will decide as you do." She answered, "The decision is difficult. Yet I choose the most famous king, and that is King Sigmund, although he is very old." Thus she was given to Sigmund, and King Lyngvi went away. Sigmund was married, receiving Hortis as his bride. Each successive day they feasted, better and with more zeal. After this, King Sigmund returned home to Hunland, and his father-in-law King Elemi went with him, and Sigmund now tended to his kingdom. King Lyngvi and his brothers now gathered an army and went against Sigmund, because, although they had always received on the short end of the previous dealings, this new development was one too many. Now they intended to destroy the pride of the Volsungs. They arrived in Hunland and sent word to King Sigmund. They did not want to sneak up on him, and they were certain he would not run away. King Sigmund said he would come to battle and gathered an army, but Jordiz, together with a bondwoman of great wealth, was driven to a forest. Here Jordiz stayed during the fighting. The Vikings leapt from their ships with an unconquerable army. King Sigmund and Eliami rose their banners, and then the trumpets were blown. King Sigmund now let his horn, the one his father once owned, and urged his men onward. Sigmund had a much smaller force. A fierce battle commenced, and, although Sigmund was old, he fought hard and was always at the front of his men. Neither shield nor mailcoat could withstand him, and again that day he went through the ranks of his enemies, and no one could foresee how it would end between them. Many an arrow and spear were cast in the air. Sigmund's spaewoman. I do not know what that means, but I will look it up. Here we go. Spadasir, spaewoman. Literally means prophetic female spirit. Got it. Alright. Sigmund's spaewoman, however, shielded him so well that he remained unscathed, and no one could count how many men fell before him. Both his arms were bloody to the shoulder. The battle had been going on for some time when a man came into the fight. He had a wide-brimmed hat that sloped over his face, and he wore a black hooded cloak. He had one eye and held a spear in hand. This man came up to King Sigmund, raising the spear before him. When Sigmund struck hard with his sword, it broke in two against the spear. The tide of the battle was gone, for King Sigmund's luck was now gone, and many of his men fell. The king did not seek to protect himself, and fiercely urged his men on. Now it is as they say, no one is able against many. Chapter 12. Jordiz Remarries. King Sigmund, along with King Elami, his father-in-law, fell in this battle at the head of his troops. The larger part of Sigmund's force fell with him. King Lyngvi now advanced towards the royal estate with the intention of seizing the princess. But in this he failed. He obtained neither woman nor wealth. He traveled now throughout the land and placed his men throughout the kingdom. He believed he had killed all the Volson kin, and nothing was to be more feared than him. That night, after the battle, Jordiz made her way around the slaying, and found King Sigmund. She asked if he could be healed. He, however, answered, "Many a man lives where there is little hope, but my luck has forsaken me, so I do not want myself to yield. Odin did not want me to wield the sword since it is now broken. I have fought many battles while it pleased him." She answered, "I would lack nothing if you were healed and took revenge for my father." The king said, "That is intended for another. You are carrying a son. Raise him well and carefully, for he will be an excellent boy, the foremost of our line. Guard well the broken pieces of this sword. From them can be made a good sword, which will be called Gram. Our son will bear it and will accomplish many great deeds, which will never be forgotten, and his name will endure while the world remains. I am content with this, but my wounds tire me, and now I will visit our kinsmen who have gone on before me." Jordiz sat by him now until he died, and then day was breaking. She saw that many ships had landed. She spoke to her slave woman, "We will exchange clothes, and you will use my name and say you are a king's daughter." And this they did. The Vikings could see great carnage, but also the women who were heading to the woods. They recognized that an important event had occurred, and so they leapt from their ships. Alf, son of King Hjalprek of Denmark, led this force. He had sailed along the coast with his army. They reached the battlefield and saw a large number of dead. King Alf now issued orders to look for the women, and this was done. He asked the women who they were, as little could be distinguished from their appearance. The bondwoman answered for them both. She told of the fall of King Sigmund and King Eleni, and along the many other great men, and said what had caused this. Alf asked if they knew where this king's treasure was concealed. The bondwoman replied, "It is certainly expected that we should know," and showed them the way to the treasure. They found enormous wealth, so much that men thought they had never seen an equal amount gathered in one place, or more precious things. They carried the wealth to King Alf's ships. Jordiz and the slave woman followed them. He now returned to his kingdom and made known that these kings had fallen, and who were the most famous of men. The king sat at the helm of the ship, and the women sat on the first bench. He spoke to them and listened carefully to what they said. The king returned home to his kingdom and had much wealth. Alf was the most able of men, and when he had been home a short while, the queen asked her son Alf, "Why does the fair woman wear fewer rings and lesser clothing? It seems to me that she is nobler than the whom you have made less of." He replied, "I have suspected in her manner that she is not a serving woman's. When we first met, she knew how to meet great men of rank. I shall put this to a test." Now one time when they were drinking, the king talked with the women and said, "How do you note the break of day, when the night grows light, if you cannot see the heavenly bodies?" The maidservant answered, "This is how I note it. As a child, I was a habit of drinking quite a bit before dawn. And when I stopped doing that, I would still wake up at the same time, and that is my signal." The king smiled at this reply and said, "That is a poor habit for a king's daughter." Then he turned to Jordiz and asked her the same. She answered him, "My father gave me a small gold ring with this characteristic. Just before daybreak, it grows cold on my finger. That's how I know." The king answered, "Gold must certainly be abundant if the serving girls wore it, and you have hidden from me long enough. I would have treated you as if we were both children of the same king if you had told me. But I shall treat you in an even better way, as you deserve. You shall be my wife, and I shall pay your dowry when you have given birth to a child." She replied, and the complete truth about her situation. She stayed there now with much honor, and was thought of the most worthy of women. Chapter 13, where things start getting interesting. The Birth of Sigurd. It is now thought that Jordiz gave birth to a son, and the boy was brought between Alf's father, King Hjalprek. The king was pleased when he saw the boy's piercing eyes, and he said that none would be his like or his equal. The child is sprinkled with water and named Sigurd. All say one thing about him, that none was his match in conduct or size. He was raised here with King Hjalprek, and all showed him great affection. And when all the most renowned men and kings and ancient sagas are named, Sigurd must be counted foremost in strength and accomplishments, in zeal and valor. Of these qualities he possessed more than any other man in the northern world. Sigurd grew up there with Hjalprek and was loved by everyone. Hjalprek betrothed Jordiz to King Alf and fixed her dowry. Regan, the son of King Fafnir. Oh, sorry, not king. I got so used to saying king before everything. Regan, the son of Hreindmar, was Sigurd's foster father. He taught Sigurd sports, chess, and runes, among many other things. He also taught Sigurd to speak in several tongues, as well as the custom for a king's son. One time, when they were both together, Regan asked Sigurd if he knew how much wealth his father had, and who was guarding it. Sigurd answered and said that the kings watched over it. Regan said, "Do you trust them completely?" Sigurd replied, "It is fitting that they guard it as long as it suits me, for they can watch over it better than I." Regan came to him another time and said, "It is strange that you want to be the stable boy of kings, or to go about like a vagrant." Sigurd answered, "That is not true, for I rule over everything with them. I can take whatever I want." Regan said, "Ask if they'll give you a horse." It shall be done as soon as I wish, answered Sigurd. Sigurd now met with the kings. The king said to Sigurd, "What do you want from us?" Sigurd replied, "I would accept a horse for my entertainment." The king said, "Choose yourself a horse and anything else you want that we possess." On the next day, Sigurd went to the forest and met an old man with a long beard. The man was unknown to Sigurd. He asked Sigurd where he was going. Sigurd answered, "I'm going to choose a horse. Advise me in this." The man responded, "Let us go and drive them to a river called Busselsjarn." They drove the horses into the deep river and all swam ashore but one. Race carefully, because he will become better than any other horse. The man disappeared then. Sigurd called the horse Grani, and it was the best horse there ever was. It was Odin who Sigurd met. Again, Reagan spoke to Sigurd. "You have too little wealth. It vexes me that you run around like a messenger boy. But I can tell you where great wealth is to be had, and likely that there is honor in seeking it, and glory should you acquire it." Sigurd asked where this wealth may be, and who was watching over it. Regan answered, "His name is Fafnir, and he is lying a short way away from the place called Gnithheath. When you get there, you will say that never you have seen in one place more riches and gold. And you will not need more, even if you become the oldest and most famous of kings." Sigurd answered, "Although I am young, I know the nature of this serpent, and I have heard no one dare go against him because of his size and ferocity." Regan replied, "That's not true. His size is no different from others of grass snakes, and more is made of it than it deserves. And also it would seem to your forefathers. Although you are of the Volsung stock, you do not appear to have the spirit of that king, which is figured foremost in every form of distinction." Sigurd said, "It may be that I do not have much in their valor or skill, but there is no need to taunt me when I'm a little past childhood. Why do you urge me on so strongly?" Regan replied, "There is a tale behind this, and I will tell it to you." "Let me hear it," said Sigurd. Chapter 14, The Otters' Ransom. This tale begins with my father, who was named Hreidmar, a great and wealthy man. One of his sons was named Fafnir, another Otter, and I was the third, the least accomplished and the least honored. I knew how to work iron as well as silver and gold, and from everything I could make something useful. My brother Otter was a different occupation in nature. He was a great fisherman and surpassed other men in this skill. He had the likeness of an otter during the day and was always catching fish up in his mouth. He brought his catch to his father and thus greatly helped him. He was in many ways like an otter. He came home late and ate alone with his eyes shut because he could not stand seeing his food diminish. Fafnir was by far the largest and fiercest of the sons, and he wanted to call everything his own. "There was a dwarf named Andvari," said Regan. "He always was in the waterfall called Andvari's Fall. He was in the shape of a pike, and he caught food there for himself, for there were many fish in the falls. My brother Otter used to go to the waterfall and bring up fish in his mouth, laying them one by one on the bank. Odin, Loki, and Honir were traveling and came to Andvari's Fall. Otter had caught a salmon and was eating it, half dozing in the river bank. Loki took a stone and struck the otter to death. The Aesir considered themselves fortunate in their catch and skinned the otter. That evening, they came to Hreidmar's and showed him with their catch. Then we seized them, imposing their fine and ransom that they filled the skin with gold and covered the outside with red gold. They sent Loki to obtain the gold. He went to Ran and got her net. Then he went to Andvari's Fall and cast the net out for the pike, which leapt into the net. Then Loki said, "Which is the fish that runs through the flood, yet knows not to guard himself from danger? Your head, ransom it from hell, and find me the fire of the well. Andvari is my name, Odin was my father, many falls I have fared over. A wretched Norn, destined in ancient days, that I should wade in water." Loki saw Andvari's gold, and when Andvari handed it over, he kept one ring back, but Loki took it from him. The dwarf went into the rock and said that the gold ring would be the death of whoever owned it. The same applied to all gold. The Aesir delivered the riches to Remarries, stuffed the otter skin, and set it on its feet. Then they had to pile the gold up next to it and cover the outside. And when that was done, Remarries came forward and saw that one whisker was open, and demanded that it be covered. Then Odin drew the ring, Andvaran, out from his hand and covered the hair. Then Loki said, "With the gold you are now paid, as payment you have had, as much as my head, no ease is assigned to your son. Death it is for you both." Afterward, Fafnir killed his father, continued Reagan, and it was murder since he hid the body. I obtained none of the treasure. Fafnir became so ill-natured that he set out for the wilds and allowed no one to enjoy the treasure but himself. He has since become the most evil serpent and lies upon the horde. Afterward, I traveled to the king and became a smith. And this is the story of how I lost the legacy of my father and compensation for my brother. Gold has since been called Otters' ransom and is spoken of as such. Sigurd answered, "You have lost much, and your kinsmen have been vile." So, we got a dragon who is completely greedy over a bunch of gold. We have a magic ring that's cursed. And we're about to get a sword that was broken be reforged. Chapter 15. Regan forges Graham. Sigurd said, "Make a sword now with your skill, so that its equal has never been made. Do this, and I will be able to work great deeds if courage helps, and if you want me to kill this dragon." Regan said, "With confidence I shall make it, and you shall be able to kill Fafnir with this sword." Regan now made a sword. He gave it to Sigurd, who took it and said, "This is your smithing, Regan." Sigurd struck the anvil and the sword broke. He threw down the blade and told Regan to forge another one, a better one. Regan made a second sword and brought it to Sigurd. He considered it. "You will like this one, although you are a hard man to forge for." Sigurd tried the sword, and he broke it like the first one. Sigurd said to Regan, "You're untrustworthy, just like your forefathers." Sigurd now went to his mother. She greeted him well. They talked with each other and drank. Then Sigurd said, "Have I rightly heard that King Sigmund gave you the sword Graham in 2 pieces?" "That is true," she replied. "Give it to me." Sigurd said, "I wish to have it." She said he was likely to win renown and gave him the sword. Sigurd met with Regan and told him to make a sword worthy of these fragments. Regan became angry and went to his forge with a piece of the sword. He thought Sigurd demanding about the metalwork. Now Regan made a sword, and when he brought it out of the forge, it seemed to his apprentices that flames were leaping from its edges. He told Sigurd to take the sword, and he said he was no swordsmith if this one broke. Sigurd hewed at the anvil and split the anvil to its base. The blade did not shatter or break. He praised the sword highly and went to the river with a tuft of wool, which he threw in against its current. The sword cut the wool in 2 when its tuft ran against the blade. Sigurd went home contented. Regan said, "You must fulfill your vow that I have made the sword, and you go meet Fafnir." Sigurd replied, "I will fulfill it, but first there is another task. I must avenge my father." The older Sigurd grew, the more he was loved, and every mother's child held him dear. Chapter 16. Gripir foretells Sigurd's future. There was a man named Gripir, the brother of Sigurd's mother. Soon after the sword had been made, Sigurd went and met with Gripir because his uncle could see the future and knew the fate of men. Sigurd asked Gripir how his life would go. For a long time Gripir was unwilling to answer, but finally, yielding to Sigurd's fervent pleas, he told him his whole fate, exactly as it later came to pass. And when Gripir told him these things, he asked. Sigurd rode home. Soon afterward he and Regan met, and Regan said, "Kill Fafnir, as you have promised." Sigurd answered, "I shall do that, but first I must do something else. Avenge King Sigmund and all my relatives who fell in battle." Chapter 17. Sigurd kills Lyngvi and Hjorvard and all the others. That is a title. Now Sigurd met with the kings and said to them, I have been here a while, and I am indebted to you for your affection and esteem. But now I want to leave this country and find the sons of Hunting. I want them to know that the Volsungs are not all dead. I would like your support in this undertaking." The king said they were supplied everything that Sigurd asked for. A large force was prepared. Everything was arranged most carefully, both ships and all their armaments, so that his expedition would be more magnificent than any other. Sigurd captained the largest and most splendid dragon ship. The sails were elaborately worked and glorious to see. The men sailed with a fair wind. And when a few days had passed, the weather grew foul with a great storm arising, churning the sea as if it were foaming with blood. Although the sails might rip, Sigurd did not order them shortened. Rather, he commanded each sail be set higher than before. And then they sailed by a certain craggy headland. A man called up to the ship and asked who commanded the army. He was told that their leader was Sigurd, the son of Sigmund, now was the most famous of young men. The man answered, "Everyone says one thing about him, that no king's son can equal him. I would like you to lower your sails on one of your ships and let me talk to you." They asked his name, and he answered, "As Hiknar they hailed me, when Hugin I gladdened, and when, O young Volson, I vanquished. Now you may address the old men of this rock as Feng or Fjolnir. From here I would take the passage." They turned toward land and took the old man aboard. The wind now subsided, and they sailed until they had landed in the kingdom of the sons of Hunting. Here Fjolnir disappeared. At once they unleashed fire and iron, killing men and burning settlements, destroying as they went. Many fled from him to King Lingvi and told them that an army had come to land and was advancing with more ferocity than they had ever seen before. They had said that the sons of Hunting had not been far-sighted when they claimed that all the Volsungs need not be feared, for now Sigurd the son of Sigmund is leading the army. King Lingvi summoned men of arms to come through his kingdom. He refused to flee, and he called to his side every man who would support him. He and his brothers went against Sigurd with a mighty force, and then the fiercest of battles began between them. Masses of spears and arrows could be seen flying through the air. Axes swung violently, shields were split, armor was cut open, helmets slashed, and skulls were cloven. Many men fell to the ground. When the battle had gone on for a long time, Sigurd advanced past the standards, holding in his hand the sword Gram. He hewed both men and horses and went through the ranks, so that both his arms were bloody to the shoulder. People fled from him as he advanced. Neither helmet nor mail coat withstood him. No one thought they had ever seen such a man before. The battle lasted a long time, with heavy slaughter and fierce encounters. And it happened there, as is unusual when the home army attacks, that they could not advance. So many fell from ranks of the sons of Hunting that no one knew their number, and Sigurd was at the front of his troops. Then the sons of King Hunting attacked him. Sigurd struck at King Lingvi and split his helmet and head into his army body. Then he cut Lingvi's brother Hjorvard into 2 pieces, after he killed all the sons of Hunting who were still alive, along with the larger part of their army. Sigurd now returned home with a fine victory and a great wealth and glory he had obtained from the venture. Banquets were prepared for him in the kingdom. When Sigurd had been home a short time, Reagan came to him and spoke with him and said, "Now you will want to strike the helmet from Fafnir, as you have promised, because you have now avenged your father and other kinsmen." Sigurd replied, "I will fulfill my promise. It will never escape my thoughts." Chapter 18. Regan and Sigurd go riding. Now Sigurd and Regan rode up to the heath and onto the track along which Fafnir was accustomed to crawl through when he went to drink. Now it is said that this cliff was 30 fathoms high at the spot where Fafnir lay to get water. Then Sigurd said, "You told me, Regan, that this dragon was no larger than a serpent, but his track seemed excessively large to me." Regan said, "Dig a ditch and sit in it. Then, when the serpent crawls to the water, pierce him in the heart and thus cause his death. You will gain great renown from such a deed." Sigurd asked, "But what will happen if I get in the way of the dragon's blood?" "No one can advise you if you're afraid of everything. You are not like your kin in courage," replied Regan. Now Sigurd rode into the heath, and Regan ran off in fear. Sigurd dug a ditch, and while he was working on it, an old man with a long beard came to him and asked him what he was doing. Sigurd told him, "That's ill-advised. Dig several ditches for the blood to run into. Then when you sit in one of them and thrust into the heart of the worm." Then this man disappeared, and Sigurd dug the ditches in the manner described to him. When the worm crawled to the water, the earth quaked mightily, so that all the ground nearby shook. He blew poison over the path before him, but Sigurd was neither afraid nor concerned by the din. And when the serpent crawled over the pit, Sigurd plunged the sword up under the left shoulder, so it sank to the hilt. Then Sigurd leapt up out of the ditch, drew the sword out of the serpent. His arms were all bloody to the shoulder. And when the huge worm felt its mortal wound, it thrashed its head and tail, destroying everything that got in its way. When Fafnir received this death wound, he asked, "Who are you? Or who is your father? Or who is your family? You who are so impotent to dare attack and bear weapons against me." Sigurd replied, "My family is unknown to men. I am called the Noble Beast. I have neither father nor mother. I have traveled alone." Fafnir replied, "If you have neither father nor mother, then from what wonder were you born? Although you will not tell me your name on my dying day, you will know you are lying." He answered, "My name is Sigurd, and my father is Sigmund." Fafnir asked, "Who urged you on to do this deed? And why did you let yourself be persuaded? Have you not heard all people are afraid of me and my helm of terror? Boy with the sharp eyes, you had a keen father." Sigurd said, "A hard mind wedded me for this deed, and I supported it in a strong hand and this sharp sword, which you are now familiar with. Few are bold in old age who are cowardly in childhood." Fafnir said, "You know that if you had grown up with your kinsmen, you would know how to fight when angered. But it is yet stranger that a prisoner taken in war should have dared to fight me, because few captives are valiant in fight." Sigurd spoke, "You revile me for being removed from my kinsmen. Even though I was taken in war, I was not bound, and you have discovered that I am free." Fafnir answered, "You take everything I say as spoken with malice, but this gold that was mine will be your death." Sigurd replied, "Everyone wants to have wealth until that one day, but everyone must die sometime." Fafnir said, "You do not want to heed my advice, but you will drown if you voyage unwarily by sea. Remain instead in land, or until it's calm." Sigurd said, "Tell me, Fafnir, if you're so wise, who are the Norns who separate sons from their mothers?" Fafnir replied, "There are many and sundry. Some are the race of Aesir, others are the race of elves. Some are the daughters of Dvalin." Sigurd said, "What is the name of the island where Surt and the Aesir will mix together their blood?" Fafnir answered, "It is called Oskapt, the Uncreated." Again Fafnir spoke, "My brother Regan caused my death, but it gladdens me that he will also cause your death, and it will go as he wishes." Again Fafnir spoke, "I have borne a helm of terror over all people since I lay upon my brother's inheritance. I blew poison in all directions around me so that none dared near me, and I fear no weapon. I never found so many men before me that I did not think myself much stronger, and everyone was afraid of me." Sigurd said, "This helm of terror you speak of gives victory to few, because each man who finds himself in company of others must at one time discover that no one is the boldest of all." Fafnir replied, "I am being called, and I will be right back after I discover this is probably a telemarketer." Hello? Hi. I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. Hey, is it possible I can call you back later? Okay. Because I'm actually doing a live stream right now. Alright, see you later. It was actually a human being. Wow. Where were I? Oh, yes. This helm of terror you speak of gives victory to few, because each man who finds himself in company of others must at one time discover that no one is the boldest of all. Fafnir answered, I suggest you take your horse and ride away as fast as you can, because it often happens he who receives a mortal wound avenges himself. Sigurd said, That's your advice, but I will do otherwise. I will ride into your den and take the massive hoard of gold which your kin possessed. Fafnir replied, You will ride there, but you will find so much gold that will be plentiful to the rest of your days. And the same gold will be your death, as it will be the death of all who possess it. Sigurd stood up and said, I would ride home, even if it would mean losing this great treasure, if I knew that I would never die. But every brave man wants to be wealthy until that one day. And you, Fafnir, lie in your death throes until hell has you. Then Fafnir died. Chapter 19. Regan drinks Fafnir's blood. After Fafnir died, Regan came to Sigurd and said, Hail, my lord! You have won a great victory. So you have killed Fafnir. None before so bold as to dare sit in his path. And this glorious feat will live on as the world remains. Regan stood and looked down the ground some time. Then afterward he said with much emotion, You have killed my brother, but I'm hardly blameless in the deed. Sigurd took his sword Graham, dried it off in the grass, and said to Regan, You went quite far away when I performed this deed. I tested the sharp sword with my own hand, pitting my strength against the serpent's might, while you lay in a heather bush, confused, not knowing whether it was heaven or earth. Regan answered, That serpent might have lain long as dead, if you had not enjoyed the sword I made for you with my own hands. Neither you nor anyone else yet has accomplished this deed. Sigurd replied, When men come to battle, a fearless heart serves a man better than a sharp sword. Then out of deep sorrow, Regan repeated to Sigurd, You have killed my brother, but I can hardly be considered blameless in the deed. Then Sigurd cut the heart out of the serpent with a sword called Riddle. Regan drank Fafnir's blood and said, Grant me one request, a trifle for you. Go to the fire of the heart, roast it, and give it to me to eat. Sigurd went and roasted Fafnir's heart on a spit. When the juice foamed, he tested it with his finger and to see what was done. He stuck his finger in his mouth, and when the blood from the serpent's heart touched his tongue, he could understand the speech of birds. He heard the nuthatches chirping in the bush next to him. Chapter 20. Sigurd eats the dragon's heart. There sat Sigurd, roasting Fafnir's heart. Better he should eat it himself, said the bird. Then he'd be wiser than any man. Another said, There lies Regan, who wants to betray the one who trusts him. Then a third spoke, He should strike Regan's head off, then he alone would control the huge store of gold. Then a fourth spoke, Sigurd would have to be wise to follow their advice. Afterward, he would ride to Fafnir's den and take up the magnificent hoard of gold which is stored there. Then ride up to Hinderfall, where Brynhild sleeps. There he'll find great wisdom. I would suspect he would take your advice and consider his own words. I suspect a wolf where I see wolf's ears. Then the fifth said, He is not wise, as I thought, if he spares Regan after killing his own brother. Then a sixth spoke, It would be wise, course, if Sigurd killed Regan and then took the treasure for himself. Then Sigurd said, It would not be my ill fate that Regan shall be my death. Rather, both brothers be the same way. He now drew the sword Graham and cut off Regan's head. After that, he ate some of the serpent's heart and kept some. He leapt onto his horse and rode along Fafnir's trail until he came to the lair which he had found open. All the doors were made of iron, as were their fastenings. All the posts of the house were also of iron, and they had been sunk into the earth. Here Sigurd found an enormous store of gold, as well as the sword Hortis. That's 3 swords now. He took from there a helm of terror, the golden coat of chainmail, and many other precious things. He found so much gold he expected it to be more than 2 or even 3 horses could carry. He took all the gold and put it into 2 large chests, and then took Grani by the bridle. The horse would not budge, and whipping was useless. Sigurd now discovered what the horse wanted. He He leapt onto its back and put spurs to him, and the horse ran as if unencumbered. And I am going to stop there, as Sigurd has killed Fafnir. He has 3 swords now, and he's riding his horse off to adventures unknown, as we are in chapter 21 of 44. So I'm going to leave it here, and I'll pick up sometime later. Thanks for watching.